All right, so everyone, welcome back to the APA Support Group webinars where we go over philosophy and materia medica, and I think we're going to spend the rest of the year on cases. And tonight, it's our honor and pleasure to have Henrietta Beaufait staying up after her bedtime to present this case for us. Where were definitely some lessons learned. So, Henrietta, do you want to start first, or do you want to have some discussion?
No, I'll jump right in.
Okay, so Henrietta, thank you for doing this, and let's get going.
Okay, you're welcome, Jeff. Thank you for the opportunity. Hope everybody can hear me all right. So, good evening, everyone. I'm very excited to share with you a case that I've worked on this past winter. It might spark some discussion, I'm hoping, about assessment of vital force and client communication. Now I can't figure out how to make my...
Yeah, you're not in PowerPoint. Sounded like you got the Mac, so just click on the slide and then you should be able to go forward.
Click on the slide.
Yeah, anywhere on the slide.
There we go. All right, now I'm all set. Okay, meet Josie. She's a 3-year-old black Labrador retriever, breeding female. This past January, Josie's foster mom contacted me to ask if there was a homeopathic remedy that would, quote, unquote, stop lactation at weaning. The foster mom, the breeder's vet, were all looking for ways to avert a repeat of the troubles from Josie's previous lactation. The request reminded me of a remedy that goat and dairy producers are often trying at drying off. There's an anecdote in Boraki's description of Urtica urns that reads, quote, arrests the flow of milk after weaning, unquote. That is, provided there's no underlying chronic disease present in the patient. That's probably why the use of this remedy has had limited success at weaning time. I was able to convince the foster mom that before trying Urtica urns, we should rule out the presence of underlying chronic disease. If indeed chronic disease was present, a remedy chosen that was similar to Josie's symptoms would lead to a better outcome for Josie during the weaning process. So we sat down to do the intake. Josie was part of a breeder foster program. The way that works is that a foster mom or family hosts a breeding female from about 4 months of age through adulthood. The foster mom does not keep the female during the 1 to 5 days at breeding time, nor again whelping through the weaning of the pups at 5 weeks old. So the first heat is skipped. Then the female is bred to produce 2 or 3 consecutive litters. She skips a heat, then she repeats the 2 or 3 consecutive litters, skips a heat, and so on until she's produced 40 live pups. Man, yeah, I thought commercial dairy cows had it hard. After the quota has been met, the female is spayed and the ownership is transferred to the foster mom free of charge. So as part of the intake, this is Josie's extensive vaccination history. It's designed for breeding females, and it starts just before weaning, and it continues through the first year just before the initial breeding takes place. Another thing that came up on the intake was the Josie's medical and treatment history. Foster mom said that for the most part, Josie was a happy, healthy, smart, high energy puppy whose favorite thing was to fetch a ball. Josie was a good eater and maintained her weight well via her high energy level. Josie's foster mom told us of how, as a puppy, from the first day she brought Josie home, that she had never had a normal form stool that was easy to pick up in a bag. It would always follow the same pattern every day. The first bowel movement would be soft, like a Dairy Queen, kind of stand up a little bit. Then within a few minutes, a second movement would be soft so that it would fall into a cow pie. Then within a few minutes, a third movement would be liquid. Occasionally, it was followed by unproductive straining. It was always difficult to bag. This series would happen at both ends of the day and sometimes midday if on a walk. Josie's foster mom took her to her primary care vet to address the stool issue. And here's the results of all the visits, tests, and treatments. And although the tests eventually came back negative after treatment, she said that the stool symptoms and the bowel movements never really improved. She continued to have that pattern of bowel movements and consistency of her stool. So as part of the index, she kind of told me about her getting bred and whelping and that kind of. So she was bred last year, March of 2020, on her. She whelped in April without incident. She gave an enormous amount of milk and raised 10 pups to be healthy, fat little buggers until weaning started when they were about 5 weeks old. The breeder's normal breeding procedure consists of restricting the pup's access to the mother dog by separating them and moving the mother dog to group housing out in the barn. The mother dog's diet is switched from puppy chow to regular dog food, and the pups are brought out at intervals with increasing time in between. So on May 30th, the weaning process for Josie started, and they restricted the pup's access to nursing. Less than 24 hours later, Josie's mammary glands became engorged with one gland really swollen, hot, and painful. Her temperature was elevated. She didn't want to move any part of her body and would just stay on the couch lying on the painful side. Breeder started her on Clavamox as they would for other cases of mastitis that they've had. By June 2nd, Josie was examined during a house call by the breeder's primary care vet. Her temperature at that time was normal. Pain level was about a 4 on a 1 to 10 scale. The mammary gland was swollen, hot, dark red purple on the skin surface. It had formed a fistula that opened into an abscess. So surgery was done to drain the abscess, which was sutured with a drain in place. Antibiotics were given for 2 more weeks, and Josie was sent back to the foster home. Recovery was uneventful. Josie was bred back on the next heat, which would have been last fall in 2020. She whelped a litter of 11 pups on December 20th without incident. She again gave an enormous amount of milk, and even with an extra pup to feed this time, they all once again turned into fat little buggers. This time, however, Josie's body weight was sacrificed. Even though her appetite was real good, sometimes ravenous, she would disproportionately push all of her calories into enormous milk production without putting anything into maintaining her body weight. This was deeply concerning to Josie's foster mom, who was worried that Josie was so thin that she was starting to lose muscle mass and perhaps slip into cachexia. And she had taken these pictures and shared them with me. And you can see where the right across her sacrum and across her skull, just behind her eyeball there, it was becoming pretty sunken in. And the breeder's primary care vet assured the foster mom that there wasn't any cachexia. They had done some lab work, although Josie was getting close. So it was worrisome to the primary care vet. The vet admittedly felt frustrated and challenged. Every time food was increased in an attempt to stave off weight loss, she said, Josie's milk production would, quote unquote, explode, increasing the likelihood of recurrence of mastitis during weaning. When food was limited to stave off the threat of mastitis, Josie would start dropping weight. The foster mom also said that during the weaning process, she was visiting Josie every day, which was unusual. Usually the foster family only visited occasionally during the dog's stay. But the foster mom was really worried about the dog. She'd take her out for short walks. She lacked luster and energy. She would stop often to rest. She was pretty sensitive to the cold January wind. And the foster mom dressed her up in several layers of dog shirts and outerwear to keep her from shivering and being cold. She liked to sit in the sun, excuse me, and she was ravenous for any kind of food or the high energy treats that the foster mom had in her pockets. So with that intake information, I went to work to analyzing the case. I chose what I perceived as peculiar and important symptoms from the intake with the corresponding rubrics. I used MAC Repertory, Complete Classic Repertory for my analysis. I found the stool symptom to be peculiar. The two rubrics that I found that kind of described the closest description to the way that the stools, the bowel movements were, was stool, hard, first soft, and then stool, hard first, and then fluid, which was so kind of, I thought both of them together would make more sense. So I did combine the rubrics and named it stool, DQ first, pudding, then fluid. Make sure when I go right out, have dessert. So another one was that every time the food was increased, Josie's milk production would explode. And then when it was limited, she'd lose weight. And the rubrics I used was chest milk increased too profuse. She was almost pathologically producing too much milk to her own peril. And then ravenous appetite with marasmus. And I also threw in that during her walks, she would be extra cold. And I did generalities, weather, cold, damp aggravates. I also thought that the peculiar stools and the milk production would also be valuable for case management, as both of them are very observable and measurable by the foster mom, the staff, the breeder, and the vet. I also thought that the symptoms that were described about her previous bout with mastitis were important because they reflected how her vital force responded to acute exacerbation of a chronic disease. I crossed the inflammation and the hot swollen mammae rubrics and came up with what I called mastitis, swelling, hot, and reluctance to move. I also used the fact that she pushed the inflammation into an abscess as a good symptom to use, and the rubric would be chest abscess mammae. So on analysis, this is kind of the way it looked. Calcarea came out on top. It matched everything. And the stool changes, especially the peculiar symptoms. Bryonia, Vitalaca, and phosphorus seemed like they might be good matches, but they fell short when it came to the most peculiar symptoms of milk production too abundant, and the 3 stool changes within a few minutes and the ravenous appetite with marasmus. One interesting thing I found was in looking at as far back as I could go on all the remedies listed on the graph, Urtica urens isn't there. So I chose to use Calcarea carbonica. I assessed her vital force to be low to medium. I think her vital force was a bit stronger before surgical intervention, as she was able to direct the mammary inflammation to abscessation rather than sepsis. However, now due to suppression by surgically draining the mammary abscess and her vigorous vaccination schedule and inherited disease, it was reported that other females closely related to Josie had histories of mastitis at weaning as well. I think Josie's vital force had taken multiple hits, so I chose a potency of a 30C, and I chose to use liquid dosing as described in the 6th edition of the Organine aphorisms 247 and 248. So we gave 1 drop in the mouth just once as test dose. We're going to wait 24 to 48 hours, and the foster mom was going to report any changes to me. So that was on 121. Here come the reports from the foster mom. First dose of remedy was given around noon yesterday, the 21st. And as of, there was an excellent response. Josie was making less milk, no symptoms of mastitis. Josie had a normal bowel movement, something that she hasn't been known to have since she was about 4 months old or before. I thought that was pretty cool. My assessment was that we had a good initial response to the prescription as evidenced by less milk, a little bit more body weight, no sign of mastitis, and those bowel movements that were normal. So we definitely were going to wait. So by day 2, after the first dose of remedy, that was the 23rd, the pups had been nursing even less than they had yesterday. There was a further decrease in milk production, no symptoms of mastitis. Bowel movements were normal. The breeder was going to try to increase food by a half a cup that night. We still continued to have a good response to the remedy, so the treatment plan was to wait. The body weight had slipped a little bit. I was holding my breath a little, but we're still going to wait. Okay, so food was increased a little bit last night, and by morning there was more milk in the mammary glands. The body weight had decreased a little bit. The stools reverted back to normal. To several movements within minutes of each other, going from normal to softer. However, they didn't go all the way to liquid like they had been before. So there was a little change in that symptom, but still they were back to Josie's old tricks. However, there were no symptoms of mastitis. I thought at this point the influence of the remedy was starting to wane, so the remedy was repeated using aphorism 248 as a guide, which reads, before each administration of medicinal solution, potentize the solution anew, about 8 to 12 succussions of the bottle. So the foster mom was instructed to succuss the bottle 10 times, and 1 drop was given. Food continued to be increased by the breeder. So by the next day, despite the increase in food, the milk production had decreased. So there was good response to the second dose. Drop in milk production, there's a little bit of weight gain, no symptoms of mastitis. The bowel movement changed to just 1 soft movement, not several in a row. So that's not normal, but it changed back to the direction that we wanted it to go in. Josie was doing so well that the breeder decided to send her back to the foster home the following day. So the next day, when Josie went home, her body weight had increased by that time to 51.4. Stools were normal consistency, volume, and numbers. So we got an improvement there. So the treatment plan was still that we were going to wait. 18 days after the last dose of the remedy, we did a follow-up. Josie had gained all of her weight back. Within a couple of days after the last dose of remedy, stools were back to normal and stayed there. However, the foster mom said that she was still seeing drops of bloody discharge on the couch cover on a daily basis since Josie had returned. Sometimes the discharge had an odor to it. The uterine discharge was still present more than 2 months after whelping, and I thought that was a little too long. So this symptom was of value, and I added it to the analysis. I found female lotia bloody, remains bloody, and female lotia, it was protracted and prolonged. I combined the two and called it female lotia bloody prolonged. And that's what it looks like on analysis. There had been such a good response with calcareous so far, and even with the addition of the new symptom of Velocia on the graph, calcareous still fit the case. I decided to just repeat the remedy with the intent that the remedy would be repeated once a day if the uterine discharge was noticed on the couch cover. So she was going to get Calc 30C after a succussion, 1 drop for every day that the discharge was noticed on the couch cover. About a month later, the foster mom told me that she was able to purchase Josie out of the contract, and own her sooner than 40 puppies later. So Josie was spayed. I learned that Josie's foster mom did not end up repeating the remedy after that one dose of calcarea back in February. She said that between the dose in February and the time she got spayed, the uterine discharge didn't stop, but it had changed from a daily discharge to intermittent with only an occasional bad odor. So, and when she was spayed, the surgical staff told Josie's mom that the uterus looked like it was a normal multiparous uterus. During that time, the stools and the bowel movements continued to be normal. I thought the response to that latest dose of remedy was positive, even though a spay got dropped in the middle of things and it wasn't repeated. I think that if it had been repeated, it would have been very good for Josie, as we'll see in a while. Okay, so 2 months later in May, Josie's mom reported to me that she had started having bowel movements again that were like the old days, a few minutes of each other, soft ice cream consistency, then almost liquid, then liquid. There were no other new symptoms. Calcarea still fit the case. We had had such a good response from calcarea in the past, but I think it had fallen by the wayside, so it was time to redose. I instructed Josie's mom to repeat the remedy after succussion if the stool was not formed and it was not baggable. If she could easily pick up the stool into a poop bag, then do not give another dose of remedy. So this is the progress reports that she gave me. She started the redosing on, let's see. Okay, by the time she started it, it was the 24th of May. It wasn't baggable. She gave a dose. The next day, it wasn't baggable. She succussed it, gave another dose. The next day, it wasn't baggable, and so on, until we finally got down to 5 days. On the 5th day, the stool was normal, and she didn't redose. And for the next 4 days, it stayed normal, and then started to not be baggable for just 1 day. She gave another calc, and it was normal and stayed that way for several weeks. So on June 26th, no remedy had been given for several weeks because the stools remained normal. However, Josie's mom said that her eyes started to look red and had a goopy green discharge. She also started scooting her butt and had a bad body odor. So Josie's mom took her to the primary care vet. The diagnosis was allergic conjunctivitis. She was given neomycin steroid ointment to use for 5 days. And while she was there, they expressed her anal glands. About 10 days after that, Josie's mom was concerned that the dog was still really smelly. She thought expressing the anal glands would have solved the problem, but it didn't. So she talked to me, and I thought we ought to do a homeopathic follow-up visit. The stool still looked good, but Josie just still really smells bad. So during the homeopathic follow-up on the 7th, She said that Josie's eyes were better after the ointment, figures, in response to the steroid. However, she still had to wipe some goop away from her eyes every morning. And oh yeah, by the way, she remembered that Josie was diagnosed with a mild case of entropion when she got her at about 4 months. They suggested surgery, but she decided to postpone it. Maybe they thought that she'd grow out of it. And she was wondering if the eyelid was rolling in slightly at times and irritating her eye, which could definitely be the case. There wasn't any butt scooting at the time that we did the homeopathic follow-up, but Josie was spending most of her day licking her anal area almost constantly, and she smelled like anal glands all the time, and her breath smelled like anal glands, and it was really bad. So I considered the licking and the stinky breath and to all be signs that the anal glands were probably inflamed. And she also reported that her skin was real itchy. So I added some new symptoms to the analysis. I added the eye symptoms. I crossed them to do an elimination and came up, I called it eyelids, margins, red and itchy. And I also put in the entropion when she was a puppy, because it may still be there, as eyes and inversion of the lids. And then the butt scooting and the licking the anal area a lot. It was irritation, inflammation probably of the anal glands. So I had rectum, violent itching, and also in generalities, inflammation of the glands. So here's the analysis, and calcarea is still peeking its head out at the top. Still matches all even the new symptoms. Sulfur is pretty close, but it does fall short of the disproportionate milk production and Josie's mastitis symptoms. So I decided to stay with the Calc 30C. I wanted it given that I wanted Josie's mom to give it the dose daily if Josie did a lot of licking and she had a strong anal gland odor. And if the licking and the odor was a lot less, then to not give a dose. If there were any other changes, to stop dosing and call or email me. So this is the progress report I got. That was the intake was on the 7th. So on the 8th, she administered a drop of Calc 30C and no response. Another administration the next day, no response. She did another one on the 10th, and she started pooping in a series of 2, where the second one was softer. She repeated the remedy again. She accidentally went with 3 drops instead of 1. By the 12th, I got an email that said Josie woke me up at 4 a.m. Couldn't observe the poop. But by 6 a.m., she gave her another dose of Calc 30C anyway. And by a little later on in the morning on the way to daycare, she had a mucoidal stool, and it was getting pretty messy. By 7 o'clock at night, we had still pretty loose bowels and some straining. So I told her to stop. And where am I? Okay. So by the next day, on the 13th, I got a progress report that said that the stools were back to normal by this morning, after she decided, after she didn't give another remedy after 6 a.m. on the 12th. So my assessment was that we had a medicinal aggravation going on, and as soon as the administration of the remedy stopped, the stool returned to normal and stayed that way. So 8 days after the last dose of calcarea, we did a homeopathic follow-up. Josie's mom reported that there was an immediate improvement in the stools within 24 hours. Then there was a gradual improvement in the newest symptoms. As of that day, the 20th of July, her eyes were not goopy in the morning anymore. She didn't have to wipe them. And she had not been licking her anal glands for the last quite a few days. She reports that Josie's breath was pleasant and it smells just like cuddly dog breath, whatever that means. Her body odor is by far much better. She doesn't smell bad, and the house doesn't smell like anal glands when you first enter the house from the outside, like it did. Also, Josie's mom was having to wash the couch cover daily to cut down on the smell, but now she's only needed to wash it once since the last dose of calcarea on the 12th. And Josie's itching has slowed down to a very occasional, maybe she flicks at her ear, or she might, take a scratch behind her elbow and then go off on her merry way. So that's slowed down quite a bit. So with no new symptoms and a gradual decrease in all the symptoms, I considered it to be a positive response to the remedy. And the treatment plan would be to wait, and if any symptoms appear, whether they be a return of old symptoms or new ones, please call, and we'd have a follow-up in a month. So yesterday we decided to have that follow-up so I could see how she was doing before I met with everybody here. And Josie's mom reported that for the most part, Josie was doing well. She did, however, about once a week in the last couple of weeks, had a bowel movement that were not formed and in a series, and then she'd go back to normal. She also said she's back to wiping a small amount of goo from her eyes in the morning. There have been no other new symptoms. So I think the action of the remedy was positive. It was short-lived and starting to wane. And I think it's time for an increase in potency to probably a calcarea 200. Hopefully that's not too big of a jump. So once the calcarea is given, I'd like to have the calcarea 200 as one pellet dissolved in 4 ounces of water, and then 1 drop in a glass of water, and give 1 teaspoon from that glass. And I think that would be easier for Josie's mom than trying to get just a drop out of the end of a dropper bottle. So she's going to report any changes to me, and otherwise follow up in a month. So, yay! We've averted a repeat of mastitis, the mastitis disaster of the first lactation, and we also got a chance to chase some of Josie's underlying chronic disease. So she's pretty happy. So now I have a couple of questions for all the attendees out there. The panelists can hold their tongues for a few minutes and let them see if we can get the attendees to chime in. I want to know your thoughts. First question would be, what can you say about Josie's vital force at this point? And the second question would be, what should I have done differently to communicate better with the foster mom? So, fire away.
And you guys are all unmuted except Christina, just unmuted. And Ela. Okay, so anyone there, right? Mary Beth? Shelley? Wendy? Lori? Christina, you always can.
Don't be shy.
Liz? Henrietta, looks like nobody's.
Oh, come on.
But I bet.
There we go. Okay, I couldn't find the microphone. It's Christina. I finally found it to unmute. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep, you
Okay.
sound great.
So I came in when you were doing the next to the last prescription. So I can't really answer everything, but sounds like the vital force is good. If anything, the only thing I would do differently is it doesn't sound at the little bit that I heard that the dog is super sensitive. So I would probably not worry about all the extra diluting. And I'd either just give it dry or do the first mixture and just give a teaspoon of that straight. That'd be the only thing. I tend to, I'm more old school still, unless they're sensitive. So, and I may have missed that. She may have been a sensitive dog earlier, but looks good. Have all the signs of moving towards a cure, symptoms resolving, symptoms coming back, but they aren't the most severe symptoms, and dog's feeling good overall.
Okay, good. Thanks.
And she may have missed it, Henrietta. Could you repeat the communication issue, because Christina, I'm sure, has some comments on improving the communication with clients.
Well, the one place was I wanted her to repeat the calcarea back when she was seeing the discharge, the bloody discharge on the couch cover. And for some reason, I don't know if she was too many things going on at home or whatever, but we only gave that one time, and then she didn't repeat it. And I was hoping that she did, so that the Josie would be more balanced once she got spayed. And I think maybe that is getting in our way now, maybe.
That she was spayed, or did she ever get spayed or not?
Yes, she did.
Okay.
But
so in terms of communicating with a client there, it was something I did not do in my practice very well. But one of the keys that I see over and over again is we all lead busy lives, and we all forget to do things, or we have concerns about doing something that may not even be rational. So follow up, follow up, follow up. Schedule follow-ups, even if they're 5-minute follow-up. So a week after giving the remedy, follow up. Oh, you didn't give the remedy. Oh, okay. How come? Any concerns about it? Maybe it doesn't seem like the right one to you, or something like that. So the more I followed up, the better luck I had. And also, you make a little extra money that way.
Henrietta, did you ask why she didn't give it?
She was she was back and forth with the breeder trying to get custody of the dog, trying to get her out of her contract, and there was just too much going on.
Yep.
Mm.
And, and stuff happens.
Yeah.
But the only way to stay on top of it is follow-ups. Quick.
So yeah, if I would have bugged her a little harder in the meantime, then like Christine said, I might have been able to talk her into, slipping her the remedy.
Or at the same time, sometimes those are serendipitous when we look back on them, and it's a good thing that it wasn't given and you got to observe things more. So I never make the client feel wrong. I try to point out something good that happened from it. I had another one and I forgot what it was now. Oh, well, I'll think of it later. I need a remedy.
DOS.
Mm-hmm.
Who else we got out there? Joletta's got her hand up.
I do. Can I? Okay. I think I'm unmuted.
Yep.
I'm impressed, and although I like that, before I go on to this, I like Christina's last comment, and never make the owner feel like they did something wrong, because sometimes, it's just fate, the way things turn out, and it turns out for better. But I'm impressed that the dog wasn't so suppressed, even though it was spayed. Even, you were on a good remedy, but still it was spayed in the middle of a good response, but yet you didn't get severe suppression and you were able to get it to move further. So I think that's great.
Yeah.
And as far as communicating with the client, it's always difficult communicating with people. It's just it's the way of the world right now, I think. And I think overall, you did what you could do, and I think it's great.
Yeah. Yeah. Great case, Henrietta.
Yeah.
I guess the one other thing I would say is, it's so individual. I don't know that surgery necessarily is going to suppress things. Paul Herskew was amazing. I'll never forget when I studied with him in the late 80s, early 90s, and he could predict, we think about phosphorus as being when they have a bad response to anesthesia, give that. And back then, we were very dictatorial to human patients about don't drink coffee, don't get dentistry, even if you need it, if you're in the middle of it's helping, the remedy's helping you, don't get dentistry. And that's all eased up as we've learned more and observed more patients. But and anything that's done, and so Paul Herskew could predict, given the case taking he did with a client, whether something like dentistry or anesthesia would cause a problem with that specific client. He was amazing at being able to do that. So that's really cool when you can do that. But I just wouldn't assume that interfering. I've just seen the body bounce back so often from all sorts of stuff happening. It's just needing to repeat the remedy usually.
I think too, Christina, that it makes a difference. That discharge was a result of a positive overall action response to seems to be a well-selected remedy. And I think that there's sometimes less adverse effects, particularly in, depends on the remedy state, obviously, the actual remedy that you're using. Yep. But there's probably less adverse effects. It's similar to like tidying up an abscess that's opened on its own rather than having an abscess that doesn't want to ripen and kind of going in there and crashing around. So yep. So there may be some positive there. Now, arguably, having said that, if this was a Lachesis dog, I might say differently, because we know that particular remedy indeed tends to be worse suppressions as well. you know, it might not have been as forgiving, for example, were it in some of the other remedy states, other than calcarea.
Could be.
The other thing I thought was really interesting, Henrietta, with this dog was when you go back to your original analysis, and Bryonia was sitting there so nicely, and it didn't cover the totality of the symptoms, but it would have been interesting to see what might have happened with that first mastitis, like before it abscessed out and that sort of stuff, because it certainly was a nice description of a Bryonia mastitis.
Yeah, I agree. But at the same time, we still had the overproduction of milk and all of that too.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
Trust Sue and Henrietta to recognize specific mastitis descriptions. Good for you guys. I wouldn't.
Well, and we also know, you know, like calcarea often, or you know, it's not uncommon for a calcarea to move into bryonia as an acute presentation of their chronic disease.
Yeah. And Josie did remind me of those Holstein cows that just turned them, or the Jerseys, that would turn themselves inside out making milk, and then
Yeah.
they'd be downers, and you know they'd be a mess. So.
Yeah, and they'd be those chronic metritis cows and all of that stuff that this dog showed.
So we got any more attendees who want to chime in? Don't be shy.
Everyone's unmuted. Wendy?
Hey, Henrietta, it's Mary Beth.
Oh, hi, Mary Beth.
Hey, that was a great case. And I don't know, I don't think you had that much trouble with a client. I think that, like Christina said, and others, that's sort of life and what goes on, and people are busy. And yeah, I mean, this was an awesome report. Thanks.
Good. Thank you. So you think that 200C, either dry or just in water, is the next way to go? Not too big of a jump.
No, I don't think it'll be too big of a jump with the good response that this dog has had.
Especially out of the second cup.
Mm-hmm. And hopefully you'll be able to give us an update like the next AVH webinar.
Oh, okay.
We hope.
Boy. Sure.
Yeah, I guess that will be awesome, Henrietta, since it's a new case, if we get to see the follow-up of the next couple of webinars. So yeah, that's a great idea.
I'll try to give you a brief update occasionally.
Awesome.
Is that in that picture? The dog's obviously running, so the ears are just flapping in the breeze.
Yeah.
They are still floppy ears.
Oh yeah, she's
okay.
like
Okay.
just got her ball in her mouth, and just, you know, somebody just threw it out there, and she's coming back, and I just thought it was a cool picture because her ears are kind of just like, wee.
When was that taken, Henrietta? It looks like autumn, sort of.
Yeah,
Winter.
it was, well, things hadn't greened up yet.
Or early spring.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and I don't know, it's just one of the pictures that the mom gave me. So I'm not sure if it was this year or not.
When do things start to green up in Maine?
July.
Well, I tell you, last year in 2020, I had a grandson born May 9th, and I was supposed to be granny nanny for my granddaughter, who was 2 years old at the time. So I was told, you know, everything was starting into labor this 5:30 in the morning. I said, okay, I'll get going. And look out the window, and there was like 4 inches of snow slush crap on the floor. And I had, by May 1st, first I got to take my snow tires off. Said no snow tires. All the plows were hanging up everywhere, and yeah, it wasn't green that day.
Sounds like the Upper Peninsula of Michigan.
Yeah, pretty close. And I grew up in Michigan, so
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
did you make it there, Henrietta?
yes, yes,
Go, good.
I got there. It took me a
Got
long
there
time.
safely, good.
Took me twice as long as it would have, but yeah.
Well, that's good that you got there.
So yeah, sometimes that and when it does warm up enough and start turning green, it'll turn on a dime. So anyway.
And any other discussion from anybody? Judy, Lori, do you guys have anything? Elise, anything you
Oh,
want to
I just have one more comment. Henrietta, are you going to have any opportunity to treat any of the others from these, what, the family or the progeny or anything like that? Is there a chance for that?
I doubt it. I mean, the one thing that the breeder wanted to do was to get a hold of the bottle from the foster mom and give it to everybody.
Ooh.
It's it's too bad too, Henrietta, because this dog under care would be a better brood bitch than another dog without care, for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even with their, even with their trail.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah.
But according to the primary care, the vet for the breeder, the breeder's had a lot of problems with mastitis, and they've cultured and I'm just, well, they're probably definitely puppy mill, line breeding, whatever going on, and so yeah, I'm sure there's inherited disease, and maybe it'd be nice if some of their other breeding females were under homeopathic care as well, and it makes you wonder how healthy the dogs are that he's selling.
Not,
Not.
not. I mean, I just saw after listening to Henrietta, this little lab puppy comes in pretty quiet. And I said, where'd you get him? And she said, I said, oh, now did you buy this puppy or do you have a unique contract with this puppy? No, we paid a lot of money for this puppy. And they sell it for a lot of money, a lot of money. And these people are not short of bucks, except for using them on their dogs. So,
Oh.
but
Well,
it is interesting how this dog had peculiar symptoms to work on with all the stuff that could be going on. And this guy doesn't, look at inbreeding or anything like that. It's just how much money can he make from each bitch. And so the fact that she could produce so many peculiar and great symptoms and respond so nicely and quickly, not to mention great prescribing and getting the right remedy going on there, does give the idea that maybe this line of dog is much stronger and can bounce back from a lot of the crap that they get. So.
Oh, that's a good point, Judy.
yeah.
Excellent. Again, don't make assumptions about just because they are puppy mill, just because da-da-da. Good point. Unique symptoms, stronger vital force.
All right. Well,
Well, I have a quick thing to share, two quick things to share. If anybody's interested in going to Alaska, and that's been on your list, if you haven't heard about it, the VBMA, their eco trip for 2022, if it happens, is going to be in Alaska. Jeannie Olson, who's up in North Pole, Alaska, is going to be organizing it. It'll be 30 minutes north of Fairbanks. And yes, it's going to be acupuncture, but it's going to be Ari Torrenson. And he's done a lot of amazingly interesting homeopathy, acupuncture. I always love hearing him talk. And then there's a couple of people. Eeyore Basco is going to be there, and he and some others, and probably me, are going down to Mount Denali afterwards. There's a hostel that's not very expensive. So that's one. If you're interested, contact Cindy Lankenau. And actually, there are three things. And the second is, for anybody who hasn't heard, the executive director of AHVMA is no longer there. So Chuck Imberly is gone.
wow.
And Luana Paradine, I think is how you pronounce her last name, is interim executive director, and she's wonderful. And the current, past, and next AHVMA presidents are 100% on board for having the conference be the way it used to be. So the COE is immediately, we don't have to ask we don't have to tell them ahead of time what we're going to do for morning inspiration. We're going to do morning meditation, even though Jim Clark can't come down from Canada, too nervous about getting home again. And so we won't have the regular Tai Chi, but we're getting other people lined up for something every morning. And so there'll be good stuff. And Margot and I came up with what should be a really good retreat center. Now, in 2022, in the midst of hurricane season, in September, they're holding it in Palm Beach, Florida. But we have a really neat retreat center that is right on the lagoon. You can literally walk and put your toes in the water. So I think it'll be really good. The retreat will start right after Labor Day. So just keep your ears open for those things. But times have changed for the better. Everybody who's been involved for the last 3 or 4 years is now smiling. So good news for everybody.
All right. Thank you, Christina. Anything else from anyone? These sessions are a chance to connect, since we're not going to get to be together this year. All right. Well, I believe that Rosie and Lisa are going to be also having cases for the next couple of months. Then Richard's going to wind up the year in November, and we will look forward to seeing you next month with Rosie and or Lisa. I'm not sure who's up next, but thank you all for coming.
Thank you,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Thank you for
Thank you,
organizing it.
Henrietta.
Thanks,
Henrietta,
Henrietta.
that
That
was
was
Good night,
great.
everybody. Enjoy the summer.
All right.
Good night.
Thank,
Good night.
thank you. Bye.
Bye.